Three, two, one. Welcome to the SaaS Pulse Show. My name is Michael Bertoni, and I'm the founder and CEO of SaaS Talent. And I am unbelievably excited. If you watch my podcast, you will always see that I'm excited. But I am unbelievably excited right now. The reason why is because I have an amazing founder, SaaS founder, but he's doing SDR, sales, lead gen stuff. It is amazing. So I have Ingwon Chae. He is the founder and CEO, but on his LinkedIn, he actually says builder. So, but I'm pretty sure he's the founder CEO of Glencoco. Great name. So Glencoco is a fractional SDR marketplace for B2B companies. It is really one of a kind. For everybody listening to this, if you need lead gen help, if you're a company and you're a B2B company, you need lead gen help, you have to check out Glencoco. So it is awesome to have you on the show, Ingwon.
Oh, thanks so much for the kind introduction, Mike.
No, man, you're leading the charge. Like seriously, I started at Computer Associates in Fort Lee, New Jersey in 1999 at Computer Associates, and I was banging the phones, Ingwon. I mean, I was making 150 calls a day. I mean, I was old school. I was like old school, and I just turned 50. And I still like making calls. Like I'm that person. I'm still make calls into people. But Ingwon, let's jump right into it here. Glencoco. First, want to hear the background. So what I love to hear first is the superhero backstory. Your background that led you to Glencoco. Tell everybody in the audience of the story around that.
Yeah, of course. And while we're reminiscing about, old war stories when we were all, relatively younger, I graduated from MIT, and my first job was working as a Wall Street trader at Morgan Stanley. So I spent 5 years as an interest rate options trader. Interestingly enough, you might think MIT, Morgan Stanley, fixed income derivatives trading, it's a pretty mathy kind of role. But going back to kind of original war stories of being an SDR, my first job as an analyst, when I joined the company was for every morning I had to get into the office at 6:30 a.m. before the markets opened. And between the hours of 6:30 to, because I was so super junior, so I wasn't allowed to take risks or put on trades yet. So the first job they had me do was they would give me like a Excel spreadsheet of a bunch of customers to reach out to.
Do it, man.
And
Let's make some calls.
basically the customers were basically customers who had options that were expiring that day with us. And I had to call into every single one of these manually and get a hold of them before 11 a.m. Eastern time when the options expire, and get a hold of them and ask them, politely, like, whether they wanted to exercise the options or cash settle the options. And it was a pretty stressful job because if I got like one response wrong, it could be like, $400,000 in loss for the company if I messed up, how I inputted the information and things like that. So yeah, it takes me back to kind of the early days when I was first starting out.
That's the superhero. That's literally your superhero backstory, man. Like, so, oh my gosh, I'm gonna grow this company. So tell everybody. That's a great actual backstory, right? Right there. Like you got to make calls. And you're like, got to make this easier for people. But how did you grow in? So MIT, right? Stock trading. You're a wizard. I mean, you're smarter than everybody on the call. So no, he doesn't have a big head, but MIT. So how do you get to Glencoco? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed trading in Wall Street, and the industry is really dynamic and amazing talent out there. About 3 years into my job, I realized that I didn't see myself having a long-term career at a hedge fund or the finance industry. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I think the biggest one was that, after the financial crisis in 2008, there had just been a lot of regulations that really clamped down on the fixed income and capital markets. And so I kind of saw that after the regulation, a lot of the innovation and risk taking had sort of slowed down. Meanwhile, between the periods of 2014 to really 2021, we had an unprecedented sort of run up with low interest rates, and easy sort of cost of capital, where a lot of technology startups and companies were growing very quickly. It was just a very favorable market. The market conditions were very favorable for people who wanted to take risk and be innovative to go and start businesses. So 3 years into my job at Morgan Stanley, I realized, it wasn't for me. I was kind of looking for different kind of greener pastures, and I decided, I want to have a go at learning about the tech industry and the startup space. And so in 2019, I left and ended up joining at the time, it was a smallish company. It was about 150 people, which, to you and me is big, but, relatively speaking, it's a small company called Verkada. So what they do is they sell enterprise grade physical security cameras that are all kind of cloud-based, as opposed to sort of on-premise storage and footage. And I was really impressed by the team there. And, a lot of startups that I applied for, it was a pretty binary reaction where half the people were like, you seem real, you have a pretty clear quantitative background, and you worked as a trader, so I'm sure you kind of know what you're doing, but we just have no idea like where to put you because you don't have any kind of transferable skill sets for a startup. And so I got rejected from a lot of startups that way, but then half the startups were like, oh, actually, like, we don't care what your background is. Like, we're just looking for really smart, talented people to kind of go in and solve problems. And so Verkada was one of those companies that fell into that latter camp. And so the first role that I joined, so I relocated from New York to the Bay Area in San Mateo, where Verkada is based. And my first job there was on the sales operations team. So I was the second sales operations team, supporting a team of around 65 quota carrying account executives and 13 SDRs and sales development reps. The company had amazing product, and it was just a well-run company, and it grew like incredibly quickly. So, I knew nothing about, I didn't even know what a CRM stood for. Like, I'd never heard of Salesforce when I joined the company, but they had me kind of building out, comp plans, helping a lot with the data and maintaining the CRM, setting up automations. And so after 6 months of joining the company, the sales ops team quickly grew to about like 6 to 7 people. So we were scaling up pretty aggressively. And so I helped build out a lot of, the original sort of sales ops sort of not quite V0, but V1 of the team. And when I joined Verkada, I always knew I wanted to spend about 2 to 3 years learning the ropes at some really good companies and absorbing everything like a sponge before starting my own thing. So that was kind of my plan. After about 6 months in sales ops, I could feel my learning curve kind of flattening a little bit because a lot of the processes have been set up. And so I kind of raised my hand and asked for another big challenge for me to take on at the company. And so the leadership were like, hey, we really like, your DNA and your type. Do you want to go to the marketing growth demand generation team? And maybe we'd love to get more people with your kind of ex-finance trading background to join the marketing and demand gen team. Can you go and hire some people? So I took a couple months just going and reaching out to old hedge fund recruiters and colleagues, from my Wall Street days, and helped kind of hire in and convince some, ex-Wall Street traders who wanted to also join a tech company. And I helped build out a demand generation team at Verkada. And so, I switched from sales ops to demand generation and growth. I helped oversee a lot of different kinds of acquisition programs, including email marketing, direct mail, hiring our own SDRs to do cold calls. And it was kind of there where I started realizing just how important outbound sales and phone calls are for B2B businesses. Pipeline generation is the lifeblood of really any business, industry agnostic. And because I was part of the team that was tasked with looking at the ROI of various kinds of channels, that was kind of where the thesis of Glencoco originally started. And so what I noticed was that cold calling and outbound calling can be like an incredibly effective channel. The really hard problem with it is dealing with SDR churn and management and training and things like that. So I love to use the analogy of a Peloton bike, which is that with outbound sales, you can get all the fancy SaaS tooling and software to to help you do your job. So it's kind of like buying a Peloton bike, but it's not going to solve the fundamental problem if you buy all these Peloton bikes or gym memberships or SaaS tools and nobody wants to actually use the tools and exercise, right? It's not a tools problem, it's an exercise problem. Analogously in the SDR world, it's like you can get SDRs with dialers and like emails and all the tools you want, but if they're not great sales reps or they don't want to put in the hustle and the effort into the channel, then you're not going to see results. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. After about 2 years at Ricotta, I got inbounded by a now $12 billion cloud cybersecurity company called Wiz, but at the time it was a relatively unknown company. And they inbounded me and they were like, hey, we heard about what you're doing at Ricotta with the growth and demand gen teams. We'd love it if you could go and be our head of growth and kind of build up the same team that you did at Ricotta. So at the time, I kind of looked at the company and seemed pretty interesting. They're growing pretty quickly as a cloud cybersecurity startup, but my big hesitation was, they were already valued at $1.2 billion and they only had 10 million of revenue. So I was like, this is a crazy valuation and multiple. Like, I don't even know if this company, if my stock options are going to be worth anything. But, eventually the more I talked to the team, I realized it was an incredible market opportunity. And, now by this time I'd sort of done it 2 years at Ricotta and really loved the company, but I was kind of looking for my next challenge as well, because I love just being on really steep learning curves. So took a leap of faith. I joined, Wiz, and I was the head of growth there for about a year. And then towards the end of 2022, towards the end of 2021, I guess this goes back to my time as an interest rates trader at Morgan Stanley, but I was looking at some of the economic data, and this was when inflation was starting to skyrocket. I don't know if you remember that, Mike, but there was all these headlines about inflation coming up, and I realized that the Fed would need to hike rates very aggressively to combat inflation. And I thought about what that would do to the startup kind of funding environment and the cost of capital. And I realized that, if I really wanted to go and like start a company, now is the kind of time to do it, before, the macro environment really started becoming more unfavorable to startups because of the high cost of funding and capital. So I quit. I spent about 3 months kind of, taking a lot of the learnings and things I'd learned at Ricotta and Wiz, and decided to create a marketplace. And so that's kind of the genesis of how Glencoco came about.
Yeah, sorry about the background noise here a little bit. So I'm in a co-working space. So in terms of Glencoco, right? So give us the elevator pitch. Yeah, everybody just literally walked in, right? So give me the elevator pitch on Glencoco, right? So I love this thing, a marketplace to get people, but there's a lot of AI stuff happening here too that I saw when I got into it, Ingwon. It was amazing, right? So give everybody the elevator pitch, the value proposition of what Glencoco is.
Sure, absolutely. So we're a fractional gig SDR marketplace. And so the way to think about it is, on the one side of the marketplace, you have businesses. So these could be business-to-business companies. They could be service-based. They could be companies selling technology products and SaaS solutions, but generally they're business-to-business companies. And what they do is they will set up campaigns on our marketplace where they can basically list their business, set up some training materials and knowledge bases, so contractors can learn about their company, and they can basically upload lists of leads for companies to target leads that they want to be reached out to. And then most importantly, they can set a price per qualified meeting and define what the qualification criteria are. So we have like a very, performance-based model where basically companies can set up bounties where they're like, say you're a company selling some sort of service or product to an IT director, then you can be like, I will pay $700 for a qualified meeting with an IT director at this type of company that is potentially interested in and of need of our solutions, basically, and wants to take a demo. So that's one side of our marketplace. And we've created a pretty easy kind of onboarding process where companies can just go and set up these campaigns on our marketplace. And then on the other side of our marketplace, we have thousands of 1099 contractors who are all based in the US, some in Canada, some in the UK, some in Australia. So we're kind of slowly rolling it out on a country by country basis. But basically, it's geared towards contractors who are sales development reps or business development reps, and they can basically discover companies and campaigns in our marketplace, see how much they're paying per qualified meeting, go through trading modules about the company and the targeting and the messaging that companies have set up. And then they can basically go and source and set up meetings and introductions for businesses on our marketplace on a performance basis. So they basically get a commission based on the price per meeting that companies are setting. The challenge we're kind of solving on both sides is for companies, outbound sales development and hiring SDRs can be stressful. As I mentioned, there's a lot of people who can do the job, but the turnover and the churn is just really high, and managing that performance is difficult. So we flip that model on its head for businesses, where it's like, look, instead of paying fixed headcount costs with variable outcomes, the average SDR tenure is only 6 to 9 months at a company. So it's just high turnover and churn, and managing the performance is costly for companies. And we flip that model on its head, and instead of paying fixed costs for variable outcomes, you pay, variable costs for fixed outcomes, where you just pay per qualified meeting. And on the other side of our marketplace, we make it very easy for SDRs and fractional sort of business development executives and sales consultants to easily kind of log in, communicate with companies and source meetings on behalf of companies and get paid per meeting.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the things that I see, Ingwon, just to kind of solidify for everybody, because I mean, I kind of got ramped up and onboarded on Glencoco. These guys solve onboarding in the biggest way, right? So not only do they have a marketplace of people that are commission only, right? That are bounty only, right? And they're working with SaaS and tech companies like my types of clients. Not only do they have that, but they have a whole onboarding program. Like literally you build your onboarding program that you could probably leverage. I've always wanted to say you could probably leverage that in many different ways. Like once you have this onboarding thing, you could leverage it in a lot of ways. What I'm really curious of when I start thinking about you guys is your traction, right? So you're on LinkedIn, it says you're 1.9, almost hitting your 2-year anniversary. What's your traction looking like right now, right? So how many, so high level, maybe you can't say exact numbers, but how many people do you have on the platform that are the bounty people and how many companies do you have on there? At a high level, how's revenue looking? Because I'm loving what you're doing. Like I'm loving it. And I'm just thinking, how are you doing? Right? How's business?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a great question. So on the contractor supply side of the marketplace, we have, easily over like 10,000 people have signed up. And we have about 1,000 sort of weekly active contractors on our marketplace. On the other side, we have currently around 25 to 30 businesses that use our service. They range from early stage companies and sort of startups to much larger sort of enterprise, mid-market stage, and even sort of enterprise stage companies across all kinds of different verticals. So we have mid-market sort of cybersecurity companies using us to generate meetings with, IT security engineers and chief information security officers. We have companies selling payroll into payroll and benefits departments. We have professional services companies selling, accounting or financial planning services. We have companies selling into software or solutions into hospitality and restaurant groups. We also have like professional sports teams, like NASCAR teams, using us for event and race sponsorships. So we support a wide variety of different types of companies and businesses. I would say the common denominator is, they have a huge TAM and market of potential customers to reach out to. And so we help really kind of scalably run outbound for these companies.
Yeah, so kind of getting into it here, challenges, right? So how do we grow the heck out of that number? So everybody's listening here. 25 to 30, I think, should become 100, right? What, I'm sure that's a challenge, right? So what would you say are the top 2 or 3 biggest challenges right now in the business, and how are you overcoming them?
Well, I think, as a marketplace, it's all the typical challenges that come with the marketplace, which is how to match supply and demand, how to maintain trust in the marketplace between both sides, how to keep the quality bar super high, both for businesses, because we get, inbounds from all kinds of businesses. Some of them are, you know, businesses that are really like 2 college students, operating website out of a dorm room. And then we have much larger businesses. So as these customers kind of inbound us, how do we prioritize and really understand all these businesses very, very closely so that we can effectively run outbound campaigns for them. So I would say our big challenge on the customer side is just making sure we really understand our customers' businesses and, create sort of the right campaigns and experiences that are unique to their business and lead to success. On the other side of the marketplace, I would say the challenges just come down to, having processes in place to curate and identify the best talent so that we can get them in front of our customers the fastest, and kind of curating that experience, and also kind of matching, contractors who have experience in certain types of industries or verticals to the companies that are seeking that type of expertise. So I would say like that's sort of a process that we're constantly iterating on it and, looking to improve. But I would say those are the high level sort of challenges that we face, which again are just typical sort of marketplace challenges.
Yeah, this has been an awesome show. Kind of the last question that I always like to ask is advice, right? So obviously, Ingwon's got an awesome story, and it sounds like his journey in his startup world is just starting. He'll probably have multiple exits through his career, but like so in terms of what are the biggest piece of advice you would give other people listening to this, other entrepreneurs, people thinking about it? What would you say?
I think I would say 2 things. The first is that fundamentally entrepreneurship is crazy. It makes no sense. You're basically starting from nothing and trying to create value out of thin air. Sometimes that's what it feels like, where you have limited resources, you have to move quickly, things are always breaking, things aren't necessarily working, or when things work, like it's like, how do you sustain that? And so there's just a lot of, I think, stress and that sort of like pushing a rock uphill every day type of thing can really weigh down. And so it's really important to just kind of have the right sort of mental sort of perspective to be able to, understand that that's not only is that like part of the job, but like it's to be expected. And so just kind of, having the right sort of mental framework to understand that and embrace that and love it is something that is always sort of something that even to the most, hardened entrepreneurs is it takes time to kind of really develop that stamina and mindset and framework. The second advice I would have is, to treat customers and users with an incredible point of empathy and humility. So it's really important to, not just assume that what you think is best for the customer is what's right for the customer. There may be cases where that is the case, but really taking the time to flip the perspective on its head and always put yourself in the user's shoes or the customer's shoes and just try to almost like be like, if I was on this side of things, like what would my experience interacting with this business or the service or product be like? And that's really hard to do, especially for certain kinds of domains or functions where you don't have that sort of expertise in. But just having like relentless curiosity and approaching things from a perspective of humility, where you're genuinely trying to understand a customer or a user's needs and goals and motivations and desires and problems. If you're able to do that over and over and over again, it compounds massively where, one, the customer service and the relationship and the experience is excellent. But two, as you do this over and over again, it starts compounding and you really start developing a really, really good understanding of what your customers or users want. And ultimately that's what matters in business is you're creating a product or service that and an experience that your counterparties who are ultimately paying you money want. So anything that doesn't sort of like, fall into that framework is really something that should be deprioritized, and everything should be with a North Star of really kind of having that humility to put yourself in the perspective of your users and customer shoes and your partners too. And when you're an entrepreneur, partnerships matter a lot, and just really kind of building these relationships through humility is what I found to be a magical blueprint for success.
Ingwon, I love that last answer, man. I mean, we could all use a little more empathy, like probably with everyone, with our families, with our wives, with our girlfriends, with our, our boyfriends. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's everybody out there, empathy. Like, I love that. I love empathy. So Ingwon, was awesome having you on the show. So awesome. I'm looking forward to following your journey. And thanks a lot, and look forward to following.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. Take care.